I haven't been reading. Okay, no, I've finished a few books, but none of the books I've started over the past few years. And I thought, what better way to get back into reading than slowly getting back into it? So I'm gonna read for 24 hours. It's already 3, but I do have books I want to get to. There's just a few of them. Just a few. Okay, maybe more than a few. It's less a TBR and more a to be finished at this point. Or more of I have a whole set of TBR that this is just in the way. First, I just need to get rid of the ones I know I won't be able to get through. Goodbye, Dune.
Whee!
Goodbye, Catch-22. Goodbye. Not to those ones. Goodbye to these 2 books. Lolita, just because I know I'm not in the mood. And every time I've started this book, I fly through like the first 40, 60 pages and then don't pick it up. So I don't want to be discouraged by this again. And I'm also saying goodbye to this book for now because it's aesthetic, but it just sucks. This other one is pretty long. Like originally I wanted to get it done by April. I thought it would be so bad it's good. But it's so bad, it's just bad. But I'm gonna keep it anyway, just in case. I think this will be the pile I'll be drawing from for the next 24 hours. I think I'm gonna start with... What's the shortest book here? I'll save Blue Period for later. I've also got these 2 books here, which was lent to me by a friend last year, and I haven't finished it. I'm sorry. So I might get to those, but I'll go with Tales from a Tiny Room. Ooh. I'll go with Tales from a Tiny Room. It's pretty short because it's a collection of short stories. It's only 100 pages and I'm 30 pages in. So I could get this done in like an hour or 2. It may or may not have taken 5 hours and 20 minutes. But 30 minutes of that was dinner. Another 30 minutes was just miscellaneous stuff. And an hour might have been Animal Crossing. But I finished it, and it was good. So this book is a collection of 14 short stories by wayyyy that is a mix of heartwarming and reflective and wholesome, while others are dystopian and existential dread kind of energy, or just like generally dark. But as a whole, it's actually balanced. Particular standouts for me were these 3. Creation Myth, Man in the Street, and Parallel Lives. Although, honestly, I really liked almost every story with the exception of 2 or 3. They were good, but just a bit too on the nose or too predictable. It had the perfect balance where things are real enough to feel grounded, while still feeling magical and different enough to make you think of the story long after you've finished reading the book. And also the ending was good. Like the problem with short story collections and anthologies is usually you might have some good stories, some bad stories, and then the ending is the luck of the draw. Like one example being Elephant Vanishes by Haruki Murakami. I liked every story there except for the Elephant Vanishes, which was the very last story in that story collection. So it kind of left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. But this one this is the first time I've had a book leave me laughing. It's hard to talk about short stories because if they're so short, you might end up spoiling it. But if you can find a copy of this somewhere, get it. I mean, it's 102 pages. If you don't like a story, skip it. And if you don't like the whole book, I'm sorry, but it's good. Now I have to decide what to read next. But I just remembered, I have another book. It's a Junji Ito book, and I kind of want to... I don't know if this is the kind of book you'd get in a readathon because you want to savor it more, especially with the really good illustrations. So I'm gonna shower, think about what I want to read, and then continue in maybe an hour or so. Shower done. Drink.
Nice.
Oh, it spilled. Floor wiped. So good. 3 books shortlisted. I've got See You in the Cosmos, which is, I think, coming of age, middle grade / young adult. I've got On Self-Hatred, which is a good candidate for reading now. but it's annotation heavy. But that leaves me with Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Caitlin Doughty. I don't know how to... It's not focusing.
Caitlin Doughty.
It's a memoir? Basta, I mean, it's non-fic. And it should be a light read, but not a light read. I remember speeding through the first 30 pages last time, but then I had to stop because I was working on school.
No! God, please, no!
Anyway, at least I have friends in the black screen for the next, I don't know, 3 hours? Okay, book chosen. Hello. I've switched to my bed. I wanted to stretch my back. I decided to start again from the start. It's just been so long since I've read it that I don't mind if I have to redo my annotations just because I feel like my mind's in a different place anyway. I just feel like reading this now is the right time. And besides, her writing is surprisingly light. I don't know, just has the charm that makes you face a subject like death openly. If not for the way she writes and the voice she has in this book, it wouldn't have its appeal. Then again, I'm saying this having only gotten to page 12. But still, I mean, I guess I'll just continue reading because there's nothing else to do. Honestly, I don't think I have anything to say. There's no way to capture what she's saying without actually just reading her words for yourself. All you really need to know is that you can tell from her words that every word she uses is completely genuine and sincere. I have 16 hours left, I think. It's not showing, but it's 11 o'clock. And I'll take a quick break and then maybe see you when I'm halfway done. Wipe. Okay, so we're halfway through now. It's 3 a.m. I say halfway through, but if you subtract the Animal Crossing time, the eating, then another eating, and then being really sleepy that I couldn't read, let's just say I'm not halfway done. I am now 16 hours away to completing the 24-hour reading goal. But I am at least over a quarter of the way. The caffeine is hitting just now. It's kind of a bummer because I've been having multiple nights where I just can't sleep and I end up falling asleep at like 6 a.m., 7 a.m. But then tonight, all of a sudden, my body's like, I'm gonna try to read more, but also I might fall asleep anyway. Good morning. I did end up falling asleep around like 6 because of YouTube shorts. And honestly, I just woke up now because 1, it's hot, and 2, I gotta check turnip prices. So I'm gonna do that, get some food in me, and then continue reading. Because it's looking like this 24-hour reading session is turning into just a normal 3-day reading session. With the weather not looking like it was gonna get any cooler anyway, I decided to just leave, go to a coffee shop, and I ended up in Milk Plus Studio Banawe. I ended up getting a Brazilian limeade type drink that I just added a shot of espresso to, which you can probably see from my very stably shot footage. I know it looks gross. It kinda looks like, I don't know, like a watered down skim milk, soy milk thing that you added old coffee to, and it looks like there's floating dandruff in it. But that's just because I put the coffee in it and it's not normally there. It just kind of separates into something that does not look appetizing, but I swear it's good. It tastes kind of like one of those orange espresso tonic drinks, like it's the same level of refreshing. It's just not the most appetizing thing to look at. Just keep stirring and don't look at it. After spending a really long time setting up, I eventually started doing this thing called reading. It's where I open a thing and then look at the letters and words and then read them. I thought the weird squiggly things were just there, but did you know they have meaning? It's pretty fun. And for some proof, I'm just gonna let this time-lapse play out for a bit and I'll leave you with some nice Zelda music. Or maybe Animal Crossing music. I'll just decide this later on, so since you're the one watching this video, you tell me. So, after the cafe reading session yesterday, I may or may not have just fallen asleep, but the good thing is, it was the first time in a long time since I had one of those natural early waking up moments, which may or may not have been because I was dreaming about Taiwanese beef noodles, and I was just really hungry. So yeah, I got that craving satisfied. So I'd say I have another 13 hours of reading left, and I'm a bit over halfway of this. And I was wrong. It's not just a one-trick pony of charming writing and dark humor and something just plain like that. Caitlin would also talk about how different societies historically would deal with death or their relationship with death, which I enjoy, but also combined with the 24-hour reading makes me feel like I'm cramming a paper. But it's still fun, it's still fun. Probably because of the balance of morbidity. It does warn you at the start that there are some realistic depictions of death and handling of dead bodies. And while I was expecting that, I wasn't expecting the things she shares here, which I think can be summed up by the fact that most of my annotations are just variations of damn or holy f. And it's not just like the physical dealing with it, but also the kind of mental gymnastics, or not gymnastics, just the mental fortitude you need to have to do the work that she does while desensitizing yourself to the whole process, yet staying sensitive enough to not remove the human aspect to it. And then there's also the whole balancing act of how do you deal with death working in this industry if or when you yourself are close to the death of the deceased, the deceased, growing up in hospitals, having relatives that are doctors. I'm used to being around sick people. That just feels normal to me. But death is a whole nother field of... I don't know. What I do know is that I am on my last 110 pages or so. And I'll probably just get back to you once it's done, because it's tiny. I'm done. I just finished Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and it was pretty good. I don't know how she was able to make it so heartwarming and hopeful talking about all of this death, but she did. More unsettling than all of the gruesome depictions of just handling dead bodies and working at the crematorium is probably just facing death. And when I say death, I don't really mean our own death. I'm somewhat indifferent about my own death, but when it comes to acknowledging the mortality of the people I hold dear and the things I hold dear, that's the side that scares me. Thankfully though, Caitlin has a way of speaking, of just putting out her words in a way that normalizes death, or not so much normalizes, more of successfully de-tabooifying it, making it easier to face. And even in a more general context, she captures well the way anxiety can bear down on you when you're sort of expecting something bad to happen, but you don't know when it's gonna happen. In contrast with when that thing eventually happens and you don't have any control, and somehow that control is what makes you feel in control. And I didn't even expect her to finish on a hopeful note, but she did end up finishing on a hopeful note. Probably my only issue with this book, and it's a very small nitpick, is that her use of inserting references to other literature, quoting philosophers here and there, feels a bit forced. It feels forced in the way that you're writing a academic paper that you haven't had enough time to research, probably because you procrastinated, and so you're shoehorning all of these quotes to make it seem like you researched it. And the thing is, I know she researched this well, it's just that all of that makes it feel a bit weird. But either way, that is another book done. Now for the third book, I will go for I don't know yet.
One eternity later.
Okay, so I'm thinking maybe
One debt to society later.
So I'm thinking maybe this book because it's the oldest unfinished book in this pile. But maybe I'll go for either of these. This one because I've been picking it up and putting it down so many times. Mostly because it's a long read. Like, it's a quick read, but then the language is just done so well that you kind of have to pause every sentence or so just to take it all in. Or maybe I'll go for this because this is a book, or rather this specific copy of this book is a book I want to share with some of my friends to co-annotate. This one should be a quicker read, surprisingly, even though it looks long. At least I have 3 books to choose from later after I finish eating. I just realized it's blurry. Okay, so I'm finally done, and it only took 3 weeks. Okay, technically 2 weeks and a few days, but yeah. I was thinking if I should even continue and call this a 24-hour reading vlog. But you know, yeah, sure, it's a procrastinator's 24-hour reading vlog. And it's probably as true as my reading skills could do. Because I did the first 12 hours pretty quick, and then after that I was distracted, and then there's Ace Combat, Animal Crossing, but I did finish it. I finished the Bookshop book with about 4 hours left, and with that, I decided to start on Book Thief. I was initially 70 pages in, but I decided, hey, I'm gonna buddy read this with my friend. Plus, I kind of forgot what I'd read at this point. And now I'm on page 79, like literally a page before part 2. It's only when I ended that I realized of all the books I could have chosen to finish, this was probably the best one, given the books I've read during this reading thing and this whole year so far. Because I started with the short story collection, and then I read a non-fiction memoir, which was about death, and then a non-fiction book, which was about books and bookshops, and then here's a fiction book, technically about a girl in a book from the perspective of death. Like the death, not like death as... yeah. And I'm not even counting the one just for this. So far in the year, I've also read another 2 books about books, and then another coping with the author's mom's death. So that just seems to be the trend for this year. But as far as the future is concerned, I'm excited to finish this. Because this is one of those books that I feel like you either read it in school or just haven't read it yet. And I thought I did, but then if I did read this in school, I remember nothing. It seems like the book I would have finished in a day or 2, like reading non-stop. It's say exam week and you should be studying for your exams, but then it's like an easy English test the next day, or some subject that you already have stock knowledge on, and then you take the test and you realize you shouldn't have read for 12 hours straight of fiction books because you should have been studying. And you also remember it wasn't just an English test for that day, it was also math, and math was hard at that time because you couldn't do multiplication for some reason, even though everything else was easy. But that aside, yeah, this seems like the book I would have read in class, bored. Middle schooler Miko would have loved this book. Being only 70 pages in, I actually don't have many comments about it yet, except for that death sounds kind of fruity at the start. I don't know, he just does. But anyway, for the books I did finish, I finished the Bookshop book, and I'm amazed I did. This has been 9 years of picking up, putting down, picking up and putting down, but I finally finished it. Part of it maybe because when I picked it up initially, I thought it was fiction and I was just too young. I was 13, 14? Either 13 or 14 when I picked this up initially, and I was just so disappointed. Like, where's the plot? Where's the exciting adventure or just fun characters? Basically, in this book, Jen Campbell goes through different bookshops all around the world, understandably mostly Europe. What's nice is it doesn't just go into like, oh, this is a bookshop, that is the bookshop, next bookshop. It goes into not only the nitty-gritty of what owning a bookshop is like, but also what the community of a bookshop is like, what books are to people. Like, for one thing, when I was young, I remember I used to read a lot of Enid Blyton books and Geronimo Stilton books. And at the start, the deal I had was I can only get a book once I finished the book I'm currently reading, which then became way too pricey. So then I got put under buying limit of 1 book per week. But then I still got to borrow books at least. So I read Holes, the Percy Jackson series. I read Artemis Fowl, although I don't really remember anything left. But at least you have the other Rick Riordan books. You have Diary of a Wimpy Kid. You have 30 clues, the Something Clues series. I have that like I think it's above this. Yeah, above here is all the 39 clues, 30-something clues. And so yeah, you end up reflecting about your relationship with books, but also your relationship with bookshops. Growing up, the only bookshops I'd know is obviously Fully Booked or National, back when National still sold books. But then over the years, my preference has become more towards independent bookshops, and especially secondhand bookshops. I like the idea that the book is not just the book that's in it, but the story of the book, of where it's been, of the other people who have read it. As long as the book hasn't been like burned to death or deteriorated. I like the old kinda damaged copies. That's not an excuse for me to break my books. And I do take care of books as much as I can, especially the books that my friends lend me. But I still like the charm of just a book that you can tell has been read. And actually, this book was also bought at Littered with Books in Singapore. I visited there back in June or July, and they're still there. It's nice to see that they're still alive. Going in there felt like stepping back into 2015. I tried to buy every copy of a math paper press book I could find now that they're gone, but there's really nothing like a small, cozy, independent bookshop, third place type beat.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
I guess my only wish for this book was that there was more coverage in Asian bookshops and African bookshops. But then I understand given the author's background, but that would be a cool republished edition or like a sequel to this book of just what the state of books are now. As much as I appreciate the convenience of e-readers, especially considering I read most of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue while waiting in line for my COVID vaccine back in 2021, it still can't replace physical books for me. One of the quotes I liked on the very last page was, "Books have a character, a soul which lives within the feel and smell and sound of the pages. Printed books are magical, and real bookshops keep that magic alive." Now, if that magic is a meet cute, I have not been blessed to experience that magic. Maybe one day. But if nonfiction is really just not your thing, which I understand, one of the books I read earlier this year was Days at the Morisaki Bookshop. This is what broke my nearly 1-year-long reading slump. So this is fiction, and in this book it follows a 25-year-old who on the day of her wedding gets told by her fiancé that he's been cheating with her. Suddenly her life is in free fall. She loses her job, her friends, her acquaintances, and spirals into a deep depression. But then she gets contacted by her uncle who owns a secondhand bookshop, and although she isn't really much of a reader, she decides to move there. In exchange for some help around the shop, she gets to live for free upstairs and rot to her heart's content. But then as months go by, she makes friends at the local coffee shop. She develops passion for books, and the interrelationships connected with the books and with just everything is very redacted. It's very things I don't want to talk about because it's so short and I don't want to ruin everything. So if you're interested, get this book. But if this still isn't interesting for you, a third option might be The Bookshop Woman. This was the second book I read this year, right after the Morisaki Bookshop, The Bookshop Woman. And I swear it's not intentional, but it's also Japanese lit. It's written so well and so engagingly. I didn't realize it was non-fiction until I was like 50 or 60% of the way through. In this book, the author talks about her experiences after she separated with her husband, and her life is generally in free fall. She works at a bookshop in Tokyo, and although everything is hitting the fan, she has books, and books are constant in her life, just keeping her afloat. But then eventually she finds this matching site. That's whole gimmick, its whole thing is that you meet a stranger for 30 minutes and then you just never meet them again. At first, she meets some really weird people, weird being an understatement, but then she also talks about all of the other cool people she met are just weird, or just individuals leaving? Just other individuals living their life. And so on the meetings that she has with these people, she ends with a book recommendation based on the things they've talked about. It's probably what Bumble for Friends would be like if you mixed it with Storygraph. Or maybe not, because it's just such a unique experience that I don't think anyone would ever have again. I mean, not that I don't want them to have that experience, but be it fiction or non-fiction, this is just a really good book that makes you think about all of these different characters, these people, these not caricatures, but these living beings. These people around you that you don't normally think of from day to day, just being people. And speaking of being people, I will try to continue being a person who reads and not the procrastinator I am. But I don't want to put too much pressure on that. I just want to read. And I'm thankful for the books I did end up finishing, because while it might be a tiny dent into my pile, it's still a dent. And I'm just glad I did it, even if it took over 2 weeks. I will say though, I did end up deleting Ace Combat. Hopefully that helps. And we'll see if another video comes up, if I can actually finish The Book Thief. A Book Thief? The Book Thief. Okay, bye.